Picture yourself um, checking into a wildly luxurious hotel.
Okay, I can do that.
Right, but as you walk the labyrinthine halls, you notice something is just, it's a little off.
Like how so?
Well, the marble columns are ever so slightly chipped, and the ivy outside the massive pane glass windows. It's completely overgrown. It's literally choking the light out of the room.
Oh, wow. Sounds kind of gothic.
Yeah, exactly. And the thick velvet carpets meet your footsteps to the point where it feels like time itself has just stopped.
That is a very specific vibe.
Right. You arrived at this place expecting a relaxing getaway, a pause from the frantic pace of the modern world. But the longer you wander through this breathless antiquity, you realize you haven't stumbled into a vacation resort at all.
No.
No. You stumbled into a mirror.
Yeah.
And that mirror is reflecting the twilight, the fading kind of melancholic glory of an entire continent.
It's a haunting environment to step into for sure. And honestly, it serves as the perfect crucible for the themes we're unpacking today in this deep dive.
It really does. So what are we looking at today?
We are diving into Ilja Leonard Pfeiffer's brilliant, sweeping novel, Grand Hotel Europa.
Such a fascinating text.
Oh, absolutely. And to be clear to you listening, this isn't just a straightforward narrative about a building with peeling wallpaper.
Right. Or just like a simple lost romance.
Yeah, exactly. It is a forensic and sometimes, honestly, ruthless dissection of European identity. The author asks, what happens when a culture stops producing the future and starts obsessively curating its past?
Transforming itself into what does he call it? A museum.
Yes, a museum continent, completely trapped by the very history that made it great in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to examine how that tension plays out across a few incredible set pieces from the text.
It's a huge mission for today's deep dive, but we have some great material.
We do. We've got the crumbling Grand Hotel Europa itself, obviously. Then we have the sinking, flooded streets of Venice,
which is just buckling under the weight of mass tourism.
Right. And there's this unforgettable cast of characters.
Yeah.
From a very pragmatic Chinese businessman who is basically buying up the European myth to a young refugee carrying the weight of actual literal survival.
It's quite a contrast.
It really is. And I think we have to start with the physical space of the hotel because it isn't just a backdrop for these characters.
Well, it functions essentially as the main character.
Yeah. The text describes this place as just dripping with disjointed historical artifacts. Imagine walking down the hall to find your room and you realize the numbering system defies all modern logic.
Oh, it's so fun.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Room 17 is located directly next to room 33. Efficiency simply has no jurisdiction here.
None at all. And when the narrator finally steps inside room 17, he's met with this chaotic, almost suffocating clash of eras.
Paint a picture for us.
Well, there is an antique red leather Chesterfield armchair parked right next to a delicate Louis XV chair.
Upholstered in dusky pink velvet, of course.
Of course. And the bed is this enormous, undateable four-poster monstrosity with gilded pillars that vaguely mimic an Egyptian style.
It's just a total aesthetic pileup.
It is. And scattered across the room are items left behind by previous guests over decades. Items the maids categorically refuse to throw away.
Like what?
Well, a skull of a mouse, a Jew's heart, a brass vase stuffed with peacock feathers.
Oh, and don't forget the stuffed barn owl.
Right. Stuffed barn owl just staring blankly from the corner.
Staying there would be like living inside a dimly lit, highly disorganized antique shop where you are like terrified to breathe because you aren't allowed to touch anything.
Yes, exactly. And crucially, you aren't allowed to look at a clock.
Wait, really? There are no clocks.
There are no clocks anywhere in the Grand Hotel Europa. The narrator points out that time doesn't really exist there because time is inextricably linked to the future.
Oh, that's heavy.
Yeah. If you have no future to look forward to, if your entire existence is just maintaining a heavily curated pastime, dilutes into a kind of stagnant puddle.
So the text establishes that time exists by the grace of having choices, and choices exist by the grace of having a future.
Precisely. If your only focus is preservation, you aren't living. You are exhibiting.
And the permanent residents of this hotel embody this perfectly, don't they?
They do. They are walking archetypes of a bygone European world.
Like Albane.
Yes, Albane, the ethereal, skeletal French poet. She floats through the hallways with this haughty, wounded gaze.
She is just the embodiment of the tormented, uncompromising European avant-garde. completely detached from the vulgar realities of modern commerce.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Volanaki.
Oh, Volanaki, the booming, voluminous Greek shipping magnate,
He takes up massive amounts of physical and acoustic space in the dining room.
loudly claiming to anyone who will listen that all of European civilization started on his home island of Crete.
Right, he's this boisterous representation of old European wealth and maritime trade dominance, yet he's running his global empire from a crumbling hotel that is hundreds of miles from the sea.
It's absurd.
It is, but he refuses to leave the atmosphere of the past.
The intellectual gravity of the hotel, however, really centers around a man named Ptolemy.
Ah, yes, Ptolemy.
He's an eminent elderly scholar who rarely leaves the premises, and he delivers this defining thesis on what actually constitutes the European identity.
And what's great is that he doesn't just offer vague notions. If we connect this to the bigger picture, he lists 5 highly specific intertwined traits.
Yeah, let's go through those. The first one is the ubiquity of cafes.
Right, and he doesn't mean a place to grab a paper cup of coffee on your way to work.
No, he means the cafe as a theater of ideas. Historically, in cities like Paris or Vienna, the cafe was the watering hole of intelligentsia.
It's where Sartre discussed existentialism, where revolutionaries plot over cheap wine. The cafe is a public space dedicated to the European obsession with debate.
And that obsession with debate feeds directly into Ptolemy's second trait, right?
Yes. The foundational tension between Greek philosophy and Christian revelation.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Sure. Well, the author presents this as the engine of European intellectual history. Greek philosophy demands logical proof, empirical evidence, and rational inquiry.
Right.
But Christian revelation demands unquestioning faith and submission to a divine mystery. So Europe's entire cultural development, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, is essentially the spark that comes from smashing those two opposing rocks together.
I see. So the constant struggle to reconcile reason with faith created a culture uniquely driven by restless inquiry.
Exactly. It's not just a historical footnote, it's the operating system of their culture.
That makes so much sense. And then Ptolemy points out the third trait, which is a literal physical excess of history.
A physical excess, yes. He argues that Europeans play like children amongst the ruins of collapsed empires.
It's like when you dig a subway tunnel in Rome and you hit a 2,000-year-old temple.
Exactly. There is so much past, materially present in their daily lives, that there is physically and psychologically very little space left to construct a new future.
Which naturally gives rise to the fourth trait, which is a talent for decadence.
Oh, yes. When you are surrounded by the remnants of past glory and you feel the weight of centuries pressing down on you, there is a tendency to retreat into aesthetic indulgence.
The polished silver, the multi-course meals, the extreme attention to the cut of a bespoke suit.
All while the roof of the hotel is quite literally caving in, decadence becomes a distraction from the reality of decline.
And that leads to the fifth and probably most crucial trait.
An awareness of its own decay.
Right. Europe actively experiences its own decline and predicts its own tragic destruction.
Ptolemy explains how this awareness creates a paralyzing nostalgia. Because Europe has known such an objectively glorious past, it views its own decline as aesthetically satisfying.
Like the final act of a tragic play.
Exactly. Emergence, blossoming, and decay. They find a romantic beauty in the ruins.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a pushback because I struggle with this part.
Go for it.
If you have a beautiful thousands-of-year-old culture, isn't being proud of it a good thing?
Yeah.
I mean, we are constantly told to remember where we came from, to honor our ancestors, to preserve historic buildings.
Sure, we hear that all the time.
So why does the book paint this intense reverence for the past as a fatal flaw? What is actually dangerous about loving a beautiful old building?
That's a great question. The danger, as Pfeiffer's text meticulously explores it, isn't in the preservation itself.
Okay.
It arises when roots become more important than the destination.
Oh.
Yeah. When a society becomes so consumed by its own history, the author suggests it stops innovating. It starts producing new ideas, new movements, or durable goods, and shifts entirely to displaying the achievements of its ancestors.
So it transitions from being a living, breathing, forward-moving culture to being a custodian of museum.
Exactly. Nostalgia ceases to be an appreciation of the past and becomes a defensive weapon against the terrifying, rapidly changing reality of the modern world.
Because the future feels too complex.
Right. Too complex, too dominated by other global powers. So the culture retreats into the safety of what has already been decided.
It's the difference between using history as a blueprint to build something new versus just setting up a ticket booth in the ruins and charging people to look at the rubble.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
Thanks. And if the Grand Hotel Europa is where Europe's elite hide to look at the past, the city of Venice is what happens when they try to sell that past to the rest of the world.
Which brings us perfectly to our next section. Venice serves as the ultimate real world manifestation of this display culture.
The narrator initially arrives in the city with this sweeping, intensely romantic illusion.
He does. He moves there to live with his great love, Cleo, who is an art historian.
Right. And stepping off the train, his internal monologue is just drunk on the romance of Stendhal, Hemingway, and Thomas Mann.
He sees the pastel facades, the shimmering canals, the gondolas that he describes as looking like prehistoric water birds brought back to life.
He truly believes he is stepping into a grand historical narrative of his own.
But the text violently shatters that literary arrival with the stark, exhausting reality of the modern city.
Yeah, it does not hold back. Venice isn't a breathing city anymore. The book describes it as a stuffed city.
It's an island fundamentally sinking under the weight of 18 million tourists a year.
18 million, that's just staggering.
It is, and the infrastructure of Venice was built for maritime trade and local artisans, right? Not for an endless daily invasion of cruise ships pouring tens of thousands of people into these tiny, narrow alleyways.
The text points out that tourists blindly follow each other in massive clumps, blocking the thoroughfares and preventing the city from functioning for the few actual residents who remain.
The narrator categorizes these tourists with a sharp, almost cynical eye.
Oh, the categories are hilarious.
They really are. He observes what he calls the hysterical Italophiles.
Right, the travelers who show up cheering and weeping over a plate of mediocre pasta.
Exactly, just blindly worshiping anything vaguely Italian simply because it validates their vacation expense.
And he also calls out the camouflage tourist, which is brilliant because he admits he used to be one.
We've all been one.
For sure. These are the people who are utterly terrified of looking like tourists.
They hide their guidebooks inside local newspapers.
Yes, they scoff at people taking selfies, and they walk with exaggerated purpose, desperately trying to project the illusion that they belong.
But the text forces us to confront a profound paradox here.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. Whether you are a hysterical Italophile or a camouflage tourist, you traveled thousands of miles and spent vast amounts of money because you crave an authentic experience.
You want to touch something real, something rooted in history.
Yet, by your sheer volume, your very presence completely obliterates the authenticity you are seeking.
Tourism destroys the object of its affection.
Exactly. The local butcher shops, the bakeries, the hardware stores that sustain a real community are driven out by skyrocketing rents.
And they're replaced by stalls selling cheap, plastic, flashing gondolas manufactured thousands of miles away.
The real city is hollowed out. Only the facade remains to serve the fantasy.
I mean, think about the last time you, the listener, bought a souvenir in Rome or Paris. Did you genuinely care if it was crafted by a local artisan? Or did you just want a physical placeholder for your memory?
That instinct is exactly what the text is dissecting.
And the author introduces a specific, almost ruthless philosophy to address this. The idea of decompose and distill.
This is a major theme.
The text literally decomposes our elevated, sacred ideas about authenticity and distills them down to a very uncomfortable reality.
Which is that in the modern era of mass consumption, the fake is often infinitely more functional and more honest than the real thing.
This is articulated beautifully during a conversation the narrator has with some documentary filmmakers.
Right. He makes the highly provocative argument that the fake Venice built in Las Vegas, the Venetian Hotel with its painted sky ceiling, its chemically treated indoor canals, and its escalators built over the fake Rialto Bridge
is actually a superior model to the real Venice in Italy,
Yeah.
which, to an art historian like Cleo, sounds like absolute blasphemy.
Oh, it does. But the logic he uses is incredibly tight. He argues that the Vegas Venice is purposely built from the ground up to be a tourist funfair.
Right, it accommodates mass consumption flawlessly.
It has the plumbing, the air conditioning, and the crowd control necessary to process thousands of people an hour.
While the real Venice is a fragile, irreplaceable historical artifact being pulverized by an industry it was never designed to host.
The tourists ultimately want an easily digestible, comfortable experience, which Vegas provides efficiently. By forcing the real Venice to be a theme park, we are actively destroying a genuine treasure.
It's like trying to use an original 15th century Gutenberg Bible as your daily reading copy on a crowded subway.
Exactly.
The Vegas replica is the cheap paperback version. It's designed to be used, consumed, and spilled on which protects the fragile original.
But we insist on taking the Gutenberg on the subway because we want to feel authentic.
That is just a wild way to think about it, but it makes so much sense.
And the text pushes this exploration of the fake even further with its detailed analysis of the Damien Hirst exhibition at the Venice Biennale.
Oh, titled Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable.
Yes.
This exhibit blew my mind when reading about it. Hirst presents these massive, awe-inspiring statues that look exactly as though they were pulled from an ancient, sunken shipwreck.
There's a colossal multi-story statue of a demon, partially broken, encrusted with what looks like centuries of coral growth, sea sponges, and barnacles.
It looks like an authentic, priceless relic of lost antiquity.
But the twist is, it was all manufactured yesterday.
It's entirely fake. The coral is painted bronze.
When narrator and Cleo walk through this exhibit, the prose drips with a profound melancholia.
Why melancholia?
Because the fake artifacts Hirst created are technically flawless. They are cast in bronze by the finest foundries in Europe. This highlights a massive modern disdain for actual craftsmanship. We have contemporary artists pinning sweaters to maps with shoelaces and calling it a profound statement on borders, while Hirst proves that we still possess the technical capacity to build monumental classical beauty.
We just choose not to.
Exactly. We choose irony over sincerity.
But the text draws an even more chilling implication from Hirst's exhibit regarding legacy.
It does. It suggests that our current civilization produces absolutely nothing durable of its own.
We manufacture plastic electronics designed to become obsolete in 2 years.
Right. So when Hirst wants to cast the modern myths of our era in eternal bronze to sit alongside Greek gods, what does he choose?
He sculpts a statue of Mickey Mouse and Pluto.
Yes. And he covers them in the same fake sea decay.
Our modern cultural touchstones only gain weight, gravitas, and a sense of awe when they're disguised as ancient relics.
It's a devastating critique. We have lost the ability to create lasting meaning, so we just cosplay as an ancient civilization.
Wow. When you go on vacation, are you chasing a real connection, or are you just trying to consume a fabricated illusion of the past?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is. And this realization that Europe has commodified its past to the point of absurdity sets the stage for the dramatic shift inside Grand Hotel Europa itself.
Yes, the takeover.
The idea of selling the past as a commodity leads directly to the hotel being sold. It is buckling under debt and decay, and it is bought by someone who perfectly understands the business of packaging and selling this exact European mythology.
Enter Mr. Wang.
Yes, enter Mr. Wang, the new owner of the hotel. He's a wealthy, highly pragmatic Chinese businessman.
He arrives in a sharp black suit with his interpreter in tow, completely ready to modernize this decaying romantic ideal.
Specifically to cater to a newly wealthy Chinese clientele.
What's fascinating here is how the text treats this. The changes Mr. Wang implements are darkly comedic. They carry immense symbolic weight.
First, he does what the Europeans couldn't, right? He miraculously resuscitates the broken fountain in the garden that had been dry for years.
He gets the plumbing working, he solves the practical issues.
But then he turns his attention to the aesthetics.
And that's where the clash happens. The residents are called to the grand lobby for an unveiling. Mr. Wang has removed the hotel's absolute piece de resistance.
This antique, handcrafted Rococo chandelier that completely defined the room.
And what does he replace it with? A massive manufactured Swarovski crystal swan.
It becomes the hotel's new logo.
And as the European residents watch in utter horror, he proudly has his interpreter cycle through the LED lighting options built into the swan.
Pink, blue, red.
And finally, a disco setting that rapidly, tackily flashes through all the colors.
And he doesn't stop there. He finds an authentic 19th century portrait of the virtuoso violinist Paganini.
Painted from life while the musician actually stayed at the hotel.
Exactly. Mr. Wang takes this irreplaceable piece of history and throws it in the garbage.
And replaces it with a generic, mass-produced romantic poster photograph of Paris.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again.
I'm ready.
If Mr. Wang is saving the Grand Hotel Europa from total bankruptcy, if he's the only one bringing in capital, fixing the plumbing, and securing paying guests, isn't his Swarovski disco swan just smart, necessary business?
From a purely financial standpoint, yes.
So why are the European characters so deeply offended by his tacky taste if they literally lack the funds and the competence to fix the place themselves?
Because their offense isn't just about interior design. It cuts to the very core of their existential identity.
How so?
It stems directly from the decompose and distill reality we talked about earlier. Mr. Wang strips away the sacred, almost religious aura that Europeans place on their history.
Oh, I see. To Mr. Wang, an old painting of Paganini is just old, peeling paint that looks dirty to a modern tourist.
Exactly. He treats European history merely as marketing folklore. Take the hotel's Chinese room.
Right, this was a room decorated in the 19th century with authentic antique Chinese vases by Europeans who were fascinated with the Orient.
And Mr. Wang destroys it.
What does he replace it with?
A fake English pub featuring velvet alcoves and paintings of racehorses.
Why on earth would he do that?
Because he understands the mass tourism market perfectly. He knows that Chinese tourists traveling to Europe don't want to see nuanced, authentic 19th century Chinese vases.
They want a curated, easily digestible caricature of Europeanness.
Yes, they want the English pub, even if it's fake. Mr. Wang's actions are deeply humiliating for the European characters because he proves that their revered sacred history is ultimately just another cheap commodity to be repackaged for the highest bidder.
And this highlights a massive macroeconomic shift that Patelski touches on in his history lesson, doesn't it?
It does. The text points out that Europe's economic and military dominance of the world was actually a very brief historical anomaly.
Wait, a brief anomaly.
Yes. Patelski explains that this period of dominance lasted roughly from the start of the Industrial Revolution around 1820 to the end of the Second World War.
Okay.
Before that, for millennia, India and China represented the vast majority of the global economy.
So what we're seeing with Mr. Wang isn't an invasion. It's a return to the historical mean.
Precisely. The global center of wealth is simply shifting back to Asia. That brief 2-century European window has prominently closed.
Wow. So Europe no longer produces the world's goods. It now only produces experiences.
Exactly. Mr. Wang recognizes with clear-eyed business acumen that Europe has become a recreational theme park for the newly wealthy classes of the rest of the world.
But while Europe is quite literally being bought and repackaged by the East, the text introduces another massive, unstoppable global force arriving at Europe's shores.
And this force is not driven by leisure, tourism, or investment portfolios.
No, it is driven by sheer, desperate survival.
This is where the narrative shifts from the melancholic, aesthetic preservation of the past to the urgent, raw reality of the future.
We are introduced to a character who serves as the ultimate counter-narrative to European stagnation.
Abdul.
Yes, Abdul. He is a young, dark-skinned bellboy at the hotel.
He wears this nostalgic, bright red bellhop uniform with gold lettering.
That is a few sizes too big for him.
Right. It's a hand-me-down from the old regime.
The narrator often sits with Abdul on the front steps of the hotel smoking cigarettes, and Abdul is intensely curious.
He asks the narrator endless questions about Venice, about geography, about the outside world.
Because Abdul has never been anywhere else but this decaying hotel and the burning desert he escaped from.
The contrast between Abdul and the European guests is stark and deeply moving.
While Patelski, Albane, and the narrator wallow in nostalgia, obsessively looking backward to find their identity,
Abdul actively, desperately wants to sever ties with his past.
he tells the narrator that the past is a place of terror. He insists that a person's eyes are positioned on the front of their head for a biological reason.
Your vision should be locked onto the direction you're headed, toward the future, not looking back at the ashes of where you came from.
So what does this all mean? How does this story unfold?
Well, the narrator slowly earns Abdul's trust, and Abdul finally recounts his harrowing, visceral tale of survival.
It's so intense. He describes his desert village being overrun by gunmen in the night.
He witnesses the horrific murder of his father.
He talks about fleeing into the vast desert, guided only by a fever dream of his dead brother urging him to keep moving.
He describes nearly starving, encountering a brutal, one-eyed smuggler, and surviving a terrifying shipwreck across the Mediterranean.
Before finally washing up in Europe and finding his way to the hotel. It is a story of unimaginable compounding trauma.
And this leads to one of the most intellectually thrilling and emotionally devastating scenes in the entire novel.
The interrogation scene.
Yes, an immigration inspector arrives at the hotel to question Abdul and verify his asylum claim.
And during the interrogation, the inspector drops a bombshell.
He coldly claims that Abdul's story is a complete fabrication. He accuses Abdul of lying to cheat the system.
And the inspector's evidence is just wild.
It really is. He points out that the highly specific details Abdul gave, the warning of a snake bite, the dream of a bloodied brother telling him to flee the flames, carrying his family's legacy out of a burning city, encountering a one-eyed boss, the exact sequence of the shipwreck.
They perfectly mirror the destruction of Troy and the wanderings of Aeneas in the classical Roman epic, Virgil's Aeneid.
The inspector even pulls out a translated paperback copy of the Aeneid that he found in a search of Abdul's room.
He accuses this traumatized refugee of plagiarizing one of the foundational texts of Western literature to fake an asylum claim.
The bureaucratic cruelty of this moment is just staggering.
It really is. And then the inspector engages in this incredibly absurd, patronizing exercise to try and explain the concept of fiction to Abdul.
Treating him like an uneducated child.
He pulls an orange out of his briefcase, sets it on the table between them, and invents a fantastical story.
He says, a giant bluebird just flew through the window, circled the room, and dropped this orange on the table.
And then he asks Abdul to evaluate the truth of the story.
And Abdul, with immense dignity and quiet politeness, simply looks at the inspector and points out that he's play acting.
He says, I saw you pull the orange out of your bag. Your story is untrue.
But Abdul fiercely insists that his story of fleeing the desert, of the fire, the boat, and the death, is absolutely true.
Even if the names in the framing happen to match the book on his nightstand.
This raises an important question, and this is where the narrator's expertise in literary analysis actually serves a profound human purpose.
He unpacks the concept of intertextuality, right?
Yes, but not as dry academic jargon. He realizes it as a psychological survival mechanism.
He discovers that Abdul's copy of the Aeneid was given to him by the hotel's major domo to help him learn the local language.
It was the only book Abdul owned. Abdul had experienced chaotic, unspeakable, formless trauma.
And human brains struggle to process horror without a narrative structure.
Exactly. To make his trauma comprehensible, not just to his own fractured psyche, but to the European ears of the narrator and the bureaucrats who held his fate in their hands.
Abdul unconsciously borrowed the epic motifs, the pacing, and the archetypes from the Aeneid.
He needed the grand mythic language of European history to make his own very real, very modern suffering comprehensible.
He didn't plagiarize the facts of his pain. He just used the only architectural blueprint he had to build a house for his grief.
Precisely. He mapped his real life tragedy onto the classical template of Aeneas fleeing Troy to found a new home in Rome.
The profound irony here is staggering.
It really is. You have these European characters like Patelsky and the immigration inspector, terrified of losing their culture, obsessing with the purity of their history.
And yet Abdul, the young immigrant arriving with nothing, has absorbed and utilized the absolute core of the European literary tradition better and more functionally than the native-born bureaucrats.
Abdul inherently understands the utility of the epic. He doesn't just put the Aeneid behind glass in a museum to stare at it, he lives it.
He applies its lessons to survive the Mediterranean Sea in the 21st century.
Which is why Abdul represents exactly what the stagnant and decaying museum continent desperately needs, but is too afraid to embrace.
He represents resilience.
He represents youth, adaptability, and above all, forward momentum.
He believes in his destination, just as Aeneas did.
While the Europeans are paralyzed by the weight of their ancestors, Abdul is the one actually possessing the energy required to build the next empire.
But tragically, despite Abdul's promise of a vital future, the old guard of the Grand Hotel Europa cannot survive the mercilessly fast tide of commercial modernization.
Brought on by Mr. Wang.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the emotional climax of the text, which centers around a departure.
Mr. Wang, continuing his highly practical, unsentimental overhaul of the business, fires the major domo.
A man named Montebello. This scene is genuinely heartbreaking.
It is. Montebello is the soul of the hotel.
He's the physical manifestation of European service and grace. He's the man who glides around the dining room, seamlessly anticipating needs.
Brushing the invisible lint off a guest's jacket, noticing a loose cufflink before the guest does.
He's an artist of hospitality. But Mr. Wang fires him.
And the reasons are brutally pragmatic. Montebello lacks IT skills, he doesn't speak Mandarin, and most devastatingly, his face is physically carved with the deep wrinkles of age and decay of the hotel itself.
Mr. Wang wants a fresh, young, efficient, unblemished face to greet his Chinese guests.
So Montebello is replaced by the cold, emotionless translator.
The heartbreak lies in the totality of Montebello's dedication. He has no life outside the walls of the hotel.
The hotel is his identity. He confesses to the narrator that his deepest, most cherished dream was simply to die upright in his livery, serving the guests until his heart stopped.
Wow. So his dismissal is the literal death of the hotel's authentic soul.
And the reaction of the European guests to this injustice is perfectly, painfully symbolic of the continent's impotence.
They're outraged. They hold meetings. They want to protest Mr. Wang's decision.
But they ultimately fail to do anything at all. because they cannot agree on the exact semantic wording of a joint statement of protest.
As the narrator notes with bitter irony, they are Europeans, entirely paralyzed by endless intellectual debate, obsessed with procedure, and completely incapable of decisive action when it actually matters.
So, unable to save him, they settle for throwing Montebello a farewell party in the lobby.
And the centerpiece of this melancholic gathering is a classical music concert.
The narrator provides a searing, unforgettable analysis of this moment. He looks at the string quartet playing and describes classical music as the ultimate symbol of Europe's terminal condition.
He calls it a pitiful relic, hooked up to a life support machine of government subsidies.
Played to an ever-aging audience of white hair that refuses to accept that the culture producing this music has been dead for a century.
The concert in the lobby, bathed in the tacky, flashing LED glow of Mr. Wang's Swarovski disco swan, becomes a literal funeral dirge for the old continent.
The violins vibrate with a desperate, futile longing for a past that is definitively, irreversibly gone.
This sense of finality, of a door closing on the old world, echoes perfectly in the resolution of the narrator's romantic plotline with Cleo, doesn't it?
It does. Throughout the novel, Cleo, the brilliant art historian, has been the anchor of his romantic illusions about Venice and Europe.
But ultimately, Cleo decides she has to leave.
And the gut punch is that she doesn't just leave the narrator, she leaves Europe entirely.
She accepts a highly lucrative job in Abu Dhabi, working for a wealthy emir.
We have to unpack this because it brings all the economic, cultural, and personal themes crashing together.
Yeah, the emir is building a massive museum in the desert.
You can clearly see the parallels to real-world projects like the Louvre Abu Dhabi.
The emir is using infinite oil wealth to buy up classical European art.
And Cleo, with brutal honesty, admits that the emirs aren't doing this out of a deep, intrinsic, spiritual appreciation for European heritage.
They are doing it to purchase cultural status on the global stage.
They are buying the prestige of the Renaissance to legitimize their own newly minted wealth and power.
The narrator is furious, obviously. He feels utterly betrayed.
He accuses Cleo of selling out. He tells her she has abandoned her principles, her culture, and her soul for a fata morgana, a mirage of indifferent, vulgar materialism rising out of the desert.
He argues that taking fragile, context-heavy European art to the Middle East strips it of its soul and turns it into a hollow trophy.
But Cleo's pushback is incredibly powerful and, frankly, undeniable.
She doesn't apologize.
No. She tells the narrator that Europe, with all its grand history, its beautiful ruins, and its endless intellectual posturing in cafes, offered her absolutely nothing but dead ends.
Despite her brilliance and her PhDs, in Europe she could only find poorly paid substitute teaching gigs or precarious contract work at corrupt auction houses.
Europe has no money, no energy, and no vision for its own future. All its resources are poured into preserving its past.
The Middle East, however, offered her the exact opposite.
It offered her unlimited funding, a state-of-the-art restoration lab, respect for her expertise, and the actual ability to realize her dreams and potential.
She forces the narrator to confront his own selfishness.
She makes him realize that he is prioritizing the preservation of dead painters over her living, breathing future.
He wants her to stay and be a beautiful, impoverished curator in his museum, rather than a thriving architect of her own life.
It's a devastating argument that shatters his romantic worldview.
And it leaves the narrator entirely alone.
The final, enduring image we get of him is deeply symbolic. He is left behind in the sinking city of Venice, returning to the crumbling Grand Hotel Europa.
He is literally walking backward into the past, stubbornly clinging to the mast of a beautiful, exquisitely crafted sinking ship.
While the rest of the world, people like Abdul, Mr. Wang, and Cleo, are busy building new skyscrapers in the desert and looking relentlessly toward the future.
It's a masterful, melancholic conclusion to an incredibly dense work.
It really is. We've been on quite an intellectual journey today.
We have. We've explored how a deep, abiding love for history and cultural roots can slowly curdle into a paralyzing nostalgia that actively prevents progress.
We've seen how mass tourism, driven by a desperate search for the authentic, ends up commodifying and destroying that very authenticity.
Turning an entire continent into a curated, heavily trafficked theme park.
And we've seen, through the vital counter-narratives of Abdul and Mr. Wang, that the future ultimately belongs to those who are willing to look forward.
Rather than those who choose to live in the shadows of peeling wallpaper, it asks us to look at the architecture of our own lives. Are we building, or are we just maintaining the museum of what we used to be?
I pose this directly to you listening. How do you balance the weight of your own history, your own past successes and traumas, with the urgent, necessary work of building your future?
Are you spending your energy curating a museum of your past glories, endlessly polishing the brass of who you were 10 years ago?
Or are you actively, perhaps messily, writing the next chapter?
And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you go about your day. We talked about Damien Hirst's bronze Mickey Mouse and the idea of leaving physical, durable artifacts for the future. If our modern digital age, our massive world wide web where we store all our photos, our written thoughts, our entire identities, is entirely immaterial.
If it can be wiped out instantly by a global power cut or a server failure.
Exactly. What physical artifacts are we actually leaving behind for the museums of the future? When the tourists of the year 4000 come looking for the authentic story of the 21st century, will they find anything real that speaks to our souls?
Or just the cheap plastic souvenirs we sold to each other to pass the time?
Think about it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.